There we go.
Good morning, everyone. I'm here for the Saturday Morning Mastermind. We will get started in a minute. I'm just kind of filling in for Samantha. She's doing some background stuff right now. So before we get started, I'm going to let everybody jump out and introduce themselves, and then I'll hand it over to Samantha.
Good morning, everybody from Tampa, Florida. Great to be here.
Good morning, Lori Emmons in Denver. Great to be here also.
Good morning, it's Karen from Mesa, Arizona. And I'm glad to be here too.
In Sisseck in Las Vegas, Nevada, and I'm glad to be here too.
Everybody's happy to be here. Okay. All right. I'll continue, and then Catherine, you can jump out. Okay. So, today we're going to go over, we're continuing our book, The Big Leap by Gay Hendrix. We're in chapter 7, and we're going to kind of continue this conversation, but we're going to reread some of it. So if you happen to come across another video on YouTube that's talking about the same chapter, it's just a further discussion into what we were talking about. So, Catherine, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and then start to read with chapter 7, we can kind of get our discussion going after that.
Okay, great. Thanks. This is Catherine Clement. I'm getting a little feedback. I don't know if someone's unmuted.
Oh, it's probably me.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. All right. So chapter 7, solving the relationship problem, transcending the upper limits of love and appreciation. Ooh, this is going to be good. Okay, as you know by now, the essential move we all need to master is learning to handle more positive energy, success, and love. Instead of focusing on the past, we need to increase our tolerance of things going well in our lives now. If we don't learn how to do this, we suffer in every area of our lives. One area that suffers spectacularly is our relationships. As we bump into our upper limit problems, relationships are one of the key areas that suffer greatly. In fact, the greater success you achieve, the bumpier your relationships tend to be. I'll explain why and show you how to avoid this last pervasive barrier. John Kuber and Peggy Haroff conducted one of the few in-depth studies ever done on the relationships of successful people. The authors found that 80% of the 437 successful people they studied had unsatisfying marriages and long-term relationships. Only about 20% of the couples had relationships the authors called vital. The other 80% had 3 main styles of unsatisfying relationships. In devitalized relationships, the partners remained together in spite of having fallen out of love with each other years ago. They had been going through the motions, sometimes for decades. The relationships often looked okay from the outside, but there was little or no passion between the individuals. In passive congenial relationships, the partners had never been passionate about each other in the first place. Their relationship was based more on affectionate friendship. They were much like business partners. Their expectations were low, so they were seldom disappointed with each other. Because of the low expectations, they didn't fight much, and so remained together in a state of ho-hum harmony. In conflict-habituated relationships, the partners had created a lifestyle based around constant conflict. Whether engaged in low-level bickering or heated conflict, they remained in a long-term combat, interrupted by periods of truce. They seemed almost to thrive on conflict, which provided them with an adrenaline-infused state of ongoing arousal. I felt a wave of despair when I first saw these findings. If these highly successful people had such dismal relationships, was there any hope for the rest of us? It's been 20 years since I first saw this study, and with those years has come considerable experience working with people and their relationships. I don't think the overall statistics are any different now than when Kuber and Harf first published their results. In other words, I think the majority of successful people still have dismal relationships. Now, though, I know a lot more about how they got that way. More important, I know a lot more about how they can avoid falling into the traps that many successful people get stuck in. I feel a great deal more hope now than I did 20 years ago. The reason is that I've seen many successful people transform their relationships, whether devitalized, conflict habituated, or passive congenial, into vital unions. There are two main reasons that successful people have dismal relationships. One, simply because they're successful. Sorry, let me read that again. One, simply because they're successful, and two, because they don't know how the upper limit problem works. The very fact of being successful makes it more likely that the relationship will be troubled because both partners have to deal with the upper limit problems to a more intense degree. Let me give you an example. I worked with a famous couple that would definitely fit the conflict habituated category. To safeguard their privacy, I'll call them Jim and Jane. Things had been going quite well in their relationship during the first 5 years, but a sudden upsurge of success tripped their upper limit switch. Suddenly, they were on the covers of magazines, and ultimately, they even attracted ugly badges of success such as paparazzi and stalkers. By the time they got to me, they had been bickering and arguing for nearly 2 years straight. Recall that one of the biggest drivers of the upper limit problem is a false belief that says, I'm fundamentally flawed and don't deserve success. This false belief dominated their early lives, although neither of them recognized it until they gained an understanding of the upper limit problem. When I explained to them how the ULP worked and how old beliefs spring forth to pull us back down into the old familiar negative sense of ourselves, their famous faces actually paled in recognition. Mine did too when it first dawned on me how much I was sabotaging my own efforts to get the one I love, get the love I so craved. Fortunately, I made some of these discoveries before I met Kathleen in 1980, so I didn't have to use our relationship as the laboratory for all of my early experiments. By the time I met her, I had seen the destructive power of my own barriers to giving and receiving love. Particularly, I had seen the power of projection, a subject that, in my opinion, should be in the curriculum of all elementary schools everywhere. A vast amount of energy can be liberated in relationships by dropping the habit of projection. As mentioned, projection occurs when you attribute to others something that's true for you inside yourself. For example, a man may complain to me that his wife is too passive. If he were to own the projection, he would say, I have not learned to handle a relationship in which a woman is being powerful and equal, so I create relationships with women in which I require them to be passive. A woman may complain that her partner dominates her and limits her full expression. If she were to own the projection, she would say, I attract men who dominate and control me. I have not learned how to be my own boss and take up my full space in the world. Projection is the source of power struggles that eat up energy and intimacy in relationships. Power struggles are a war between two people to see whose version of reality will win out. Much of the energy in troubled relationships is drained through power struggles about who's right, who's wrong, and who's the biggest victim. Relationships, healthy ones that is, exist only between equals. When both people are not taking 100% responsibility, it is an entanglement, not a relationship. There's only one way to transform an entanglement into a relationship. Both people must drop projection and see that they are 100% the creators of their reality. With the energy saved from banishing power struggles, much more can be co-created than the partners could have created on their own. If both people in a relationship can understand the upper limit problem, they can begin to adjust the thermostat upward so they can handle increasingly more positive energy. The thermostat can be adjusted upward in several ways. Just noticing how you limit love and positive energy solves much of the problem. Do you bring yourself down with food? Do you drink too much? Do you deflect compliments? Do you find yourself thinking of something else while making love? Do you get sick the day of an opportunity for intimacy in the relationship? Do you hold back on commenting instead of reaching out to people? The upper limit problem is magnified in successful couples because each person is synergizing the other's quest for a life in the zone of genius. At the same time, though, they are synergizing each other's tendencies towards self-sabotage. Couples who wish to transcend these tendencies will benefit from making a mutual commitment to transcending upper limits and living with each other in the zone of genius. If both people are committed to getting there, the journey becomes much easier. In any case, it's a heroic task. The reason is twofold, because most of us have little experience observing healthy relationships, and because having healthy relationships is a new task in evolution. For the first couple of million years of human evolution, relationships were about survival, and communication was largely a matter of exchanging grunts. We're newcomers to the idea of having our relationships be about fulfillment, heartfelt communications, and deep commitment to each other. Any of us who embark on a path of conscious growth must remember that we're bringing with us millions of years of evolution. There is no quicker way to bring forth our inner Neanderthal than to get into a loving relationship. When we open up to more love and energy, we begin to flush out old programming out of our system. Our energy thermostat is reset higher, and sometimes this sets off alarms in ourselves. Genuine contact with another person gets us high, and this trips upper limit switch, making us want to come back down to a more familiar level. There are several ways we limit positive energy in relationships. One is by starting arguments out of fear of intimacy, at times when we could be exchanging intimacy. Another is by withholding significant communications. We get scared of being close. For example, and instead of telling the microscopic truth about it, my belly felt tight and my skin contracted when I heard you say ... whatever. We withdraw and swallow the communication. Another way we limit positive energy is by needing to control or dominate the other person, or needing to be controlled or dominated. If we always have to be right, for example, there is no room in the relationship to be happy. If you are a successful person in a close relationship, you will likely find the following suggestions helpful. Number one, make sure you take plenty of time for yourself in a space apart from your partner. It could even be in the next room, so long as the intention is to nurture the independent part of you. Human beings have twin drives of equal power, the urge to merge and the urge to be an autonomous person. For a relationship to thrive, both drives need to be celebrated. A close relationship stirs up powerful, transformative energies, and you need lots of rest time to integrate the rapid-fire stimulation that a relationship provides. If you can learn to take time off from the relationship consciously, you won't need to do it unconsciously by starting arguments and engaging in other intimacy-destroying moves. Go on solo walks, take in a movie by yourself, spend an afternoon doing whatever the spirit moves you to do. These periods of battery charging alone time give you the ability to master longer and longer periods of closeness when you're in union with your beloved. Number two, put a priority on speaking the microscopic truth, especially about what is going on in your emotions. Get skilled at simple microscopic truths such as, I'm sad, I'm scared, and I feel angry. Communicating about feelings, dreams, desires, and other inner experiences creates deep intimacy in relationships. None of us gets any training in how to communicate about these simple things, and our lack of training is very costly. Number three, when emotions are in the air, as they often will be in close relationships, don't try to talk yourself or your partner out of them. Eliminate phrases such as, please don't cry, and there's nothing to be angry about. Feelings are to be felt, so encourage each other to go through complete cycles of emotions. If you're sad, let yourself feel that way until you don't feel sad anymore. Same thing with fear, anger, happiness, and other feelings. It's the act of stifling and concealing feelings that causes problems in relationships. So I believe that's where we stopped last week.
That was. So now I'll ask you guys, do you guys want to continue on to the other 3 points, or do you want to talk about what's here? I'll leave that up to you guys. I just was going with the frame of reference because this is what we did. With the 2 pages that were included that we left out, which does help put this more in the context of what this is all about.
Either or is fine with me. I'm sure we have plenty to talk about either way. What do you think, Lori?
I was just going to say that was good to have a refresher.
Right.
I'd say
Anyway.
let's talk about what we got.
Okay. Sounds good.
Any thoughts with anybody?
I want to kind of pose the question at the beginning. He says with the types of relationships, can you guys think back on a relationship and what, which way you would have maybe been, where he was talking about devitalized, passionate, or passive congenial, or conflict habituated? Can you think of which you may have?
I've been in all of those.
Right.
I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think if we're all honest, we probably have been in some form, or I'm going to go one step further. I'm going to say, I think we've been in a combination of all 3 of these together somehow.
Yeah, for sure.
Anybody want to give an example?
Conflict habituated is a big thing for a lot of my experience because of the power struggle that always goes on, that I'm right and you're wrong and I want it my way and that's the way it's got to be.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think I think it can go into just good, close friendships too, with people that, you're good, you're close and you're good friends and you love each other and stuff like that, because I know I have one friendship. I'm thinking this person right now that we're constantly in a conflict habituated relationship. It's just, no matter what they say, I tend to come back the other way and but it feels like we're both trying to make our own points and get the other person to understand our side of view, point of view. And I may be giving myself more credit and probably don't deserve and need to reevaluate this. But a lot of times I think my view isn't necessarily right, but I think the other person cannot put themselves in my view to understand where I'm coming from, but yet I can put myself in their view because I'm able to, look, I try to look at all sides and kind of go, okay, well, they're coming from this point. How do they feel? What are they going through? But then they'll say something or they'll do something or bicker or say something back that I feel is pointed at me in a bad way, and then I get irritated and upset, and then I kind of go back. So, and then in the passive congenial, I think with some of my close personal relationships with people I was involved with intimately. You know, there were times when, you know, it was, well, okay, yeah, you know, kind of just, okay, yeah, whatever, I think. And it was just, you know, didn't want to get into go to the bickering stage or whatever. So it just said, yeah, whatever, kind of.
That's a big tendency of to just say, well, whatever, just brush it under the rug, and then it causes a stumbling block for everybody to trip over. I will admit that I'm very much the passive, congenial, and just agreeing with whatever to keep the peace. And all that I've been working on and working with is not to drag up old dead bones and talk about other people, and instead of talking about subjects. If the person isn't there, you shouldn't be talking about them or telling stories about them, whatever. So I just tend to be more passive and quiet.
I think it's interesting over, you know, on the next page from those three different types of scenarios he talks about. He says that talks about the two main reasons that successful people have dismal relationships. It's simply because they're successful, and two, because they don't know how the upper limit problem works. I think I agree with it, but I don't fully agree with it, because I think unsuccessful people have just as dismal relationships as successful people, because once again, they don't understand the upper limit problems and manifest itself in different ways than some of the ways successful people do. But I've seen people that I would deem not successful, but who's to say what success is too? That's the other part of it. And I've seen them bickering, going at it, doing the conflict habituated relationships. I've seen the passive congenial, where one's just going at it and the other one's just like, whatever, okay, you know. So I think, you know, I think it affects everybody. I don't think it just affects successful people.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is true about that, Dan. And I think that really, it really is dependent on what your definition of success is, because, you know, I mean, I can think back in parts of my relationship when I was younger, where I was working in my business and Chris was working in his business, and were we successful? It depends on your point of view. I think it was, you know, I was really focused on what I wanted to do, and he was really focused on what he wanted to do. And that may or may not be a high level of success. That may just be our, you know, our interest in career aspects. But, you know, I can see and hear how, you know, we could, well, first I'll preface this, you know, everybody has mentioned they've been in multiple relationships over their years, and I have not. I've been in one since I was a kid. And well, I say not a kid, but a very young adult. You know, I've been in the same relationship with the same person for, what is this, 30 years now? And our relationship has changed over the years. And, you know, when we first started out, it was like a passionate relationship. And then it kind of turned into this kind of passive congenial. But then, on one side of it was more passionate and the other side was more passive. So we went through some of that, but I can see how some of our struggles earlier on had a lot to do with this concept of projection of, this kind of our expectations, if you will, where I expected something from him that may or may not even be something he was capable of. And then I was disappointed when he didn't provide that for me. And then the other thing about like micro communicating of truly communicating versus just accusatory communicating, or disappointed communicating, or all of those things that create conflict are huge, because we're not really communicating. We are just being defensive or offensive, one or the other. And when you're being defensive and offensive, you're not really communicating. You're just you've got your wall up and you're worried they're gonna accuse you of something that you maybe don't want to face about yourself, or maybe you feel like that's what he's talking about, is that projection aspect of it, is where we when we are accusatory towards the person, is that really we're accusing ourselves because we don't want to face what we're what maybe we don't think that we are living up to. And then if that person then like throws it back in your face, then your defense gets up higher, and then you get even more upset with one another. And so I can see how that is a huge aspect of conflict in relationships, because, I've been there and experienced it. And yet then when I was able to change my communication style in terms of expressing my true inner feelings versus being accusatory or judgmental or disappointed, or, those kinds of things, that made a huge difference in it. And then the other aspect is that where he's talking about taking 100% responsibility. And although I do agree it's necessary, it's not necessary. Although I do agree that it is good if both people can be 100% responsible for themselves and their relationship, I don't believe that it is 100% necessary for both people to be at the same time. And the reason that I say that is because when Chris and I were struggling at our most difficult time, is that I realized I wasn't taking 100% responsibility for my place in that position, and I hadn't been for years. I was blaming him. I was upset with him, like it was all his fault. And I wasn't taking responsibility for the choices I'd made to end up in that space in our relationship. And once I was able to take that 100% responsibility for it and realize how the choices I'd made had led us to that point, then the dynamic of the relationship changed, and it made all the difference. And he hadn't learned that yet. It took him some time to get there, but just by me realizing it made a difference in how I was communicating. And by my change of method of communicating, that helped him to be able to communicate better too. So I'll leave it at that. I know you guys want to talk to.
Well, I think you bring out some good points, and it leads into back to those 3 points that we read there towards the end, where if you're a successful person in a close relationship, you will likely find the following suggestions helpful. Make sure you take plenty of time for yourself in a space apart from your partner. It could be in the next room or whatever. And I think this is something I've said for years to other people, not realizing I was saying a little bit of what he was saying here. But I said, in any relationship, you need time by yourself to recharge, do your thing, whatever, help get you back to you, so to speak. And then I've always said, you need time with your friends, just like, he needs time with his friends, you need time with your friends, so that way you get that part together there. And that's where you can maybe do the sounding board, as I'll call it, where you kind of share things with people and talk things over, so that way you can maybe hear yourself and say, oh, maybe I shouldn't do that. in the moment of being frustrated with your partner, you can, when you're talking with friends, oh, they did this, and then, go back. And you can maybe then, like you said, look at it objectively and say, oh, maybe I had a part in this, and maybe how I responded was not, helping. And then there's 3, the time where you need time together with common friends together, doing things together, where in that sense, you can kind of, do all that there to help in that area too, and help with interaction and learn or take away how that interaction works. So then you can go back and kind of redo the cycle again of recharging, going, and I think that's, helpful in a lot.
And I'll agree on some aspects of that, Dan, of the, like, when you go to talk to your friends and complain about your partner, if you really want to, if you're working on yourself, you have to be careful which friends that you use on that, because they have to be on the same personal development space as you. Otherwise, they're just going to jump on the bandwagon of complaining and telling you you're right about how horrible your partner is. And that's going to send you down the exact path you don't want to go. And I've seen that happen thousands of relationships and people, and so I caution, if you're working on yourself and you're working on trying to improve your relationship from the inside out, you've got to do a lot of personal development and find the right people who are working on the same thing, so that you can say, okay, do you help me see what I'm missing in this situation, versus just join my complaining factory and let's create as much complaints as we can, because that's destructive. So I agree what you're saying there. Now, on the getting time to yourself part, I want to bring up an aspect of this getting time to yourself as this can be part of our upper limit problem in and of itself, because we want that time to ourselves. We need it in order to be a healthier person. What's that one saying where it's, I think there's a saying that I will work on myself to be better for you if you work on yourself to be better for me. And but where I'm talking about the upper limit problem coming into play is it when we come back to this thing where he says, recall one of the biggest drivers of the upper limit problem is the false belief that says I'm fundamentally flawed and don't deserve success. And we can say that I'm fundamentally flawed and don't deserve love, or I'm fundamentally flawed and my person isn't I don't get what I want out of this relationship. And so we can struggle to allow ourselves to even have the space in our relationship to get time to ourselves, because we think, the other person isn't going to understand, or the other person isn't going to, or maybe their issues are going to cause you to not feel like you can be on your own for, having time to yourself, because they wham in a boo-boo anytime you try to do that, because they have an upper limit problem of thinking they're not loved. And if you don't want to be with them, then they obviously aren't loved by you. Chris and I struggled with this a lot in the beginning of our relationship, that I needed time to myself. And every time I wanted to go out with a girlfriend, he thought it was because I didn't want to hang out with him. And it just didn't have anything to do with that, And so struggling with that communication issue is a big one. So I definitely think that we need time to ourselves. I mean, it's super important for us to be able to have that space and work on ourselves and have time with our friends and all of those things, because we need those. We need a variety of different relationships in our lives, and we need a variety of different activities in our lives that maybe our partner doesn't want any part of. Because that's another aspect of it, is that, maybe we want to do something that we enjoy, say going to the ballet, for, one person or another, and or going to the truck show, those are kind of things that where one partner wants to do one thing, one partner wants to do the other thing. And as much as we want to be compromising and go and be a part of that with the other person, it may make us miserable. So we have to allow for each other to do things on our own and say, like you said, the guys need to go be with their guy friends and the women need to go with their women friends, and be okay with that. Just allowing ourselves that time to be apart and do our own things, and not expect the other person just to participate with us just because we want them to, because that's not fair. And that, so, okay, that's all for now.
That requires a lot of trust in the relationship, and we need good examples like yours and Chris's to be out there in the world so people can see how it can be. Because when you're not raised with that, it makes it a lot more difficult to get there.
Oh, I know for sure. I mean, it took us a long time to get to where we are, because neither one of us were raised by parents that had any freaking clue. I mean, his parents are, I don't even want to go there. And my parents are the same, I just don't even want to go there, So I don't think that, it's, our parents don't teach us, and they don't teach this stuff in school. I mean, I've had to read, all these books over the years are what have helped me realize what I'm doing to myself in my own relationship, and talking to other people who have worked through things. And that's a huge part of it. If I didn't have you guys and I didn't have these books to have read, then we may not even be together today, because we wouldn't have figured it out, because it was just, we're a typical couple. All couples are different, obviously, but I think for the most part, we all struggle with these things. We all struggle with these power struggles and these conflicts and these inner workings that want to sabotage our relationships and everything we do. So, yeah.
Maybe we need to start a list of required reading before you're out of middle school.
Wouldn't that be a powerful thing, that if instead of reading, I don't even know what they're telling kids to read these days in order to write a book report, but it ought to be relationship and personal development books. That would be huge. Can you imagine what the next generations would be like if they started teaching this stuff in schools? This harmony that we want in the world would actually be something that's possible, but it's not, because the kids aren't reading stuff like this. They're watching the freaking Kardashians, that's why our world is the way it is. Not just the Kardashians, but
Yeah.
other mumbo jumbo drama shows that are teaching them to be all drama-y instead.
That reading list, and then required to do service type of work, such as waiting tables or, working in a nursing home or something. We're going to solve the world's problems, right?
Well, I know for me, from a personal standpoint, and I have had relationships, and some of them very good and intense, but in the long run, I'm looking at myself as me, myself, and I. And in some cases, it's how do I love me, myself, and I to the best levels too, because right now that's all I have. So I don't even really have a partner to share things with, to, be in that. And sometimes being with yourself all the time, it gets to be a little much, and it gets to be a little overwhelming. And there are times where I wish I could just say, okay, here, I'm somebody else now, because I'm my own moral support on my own, got to push through it on my own, and in that, sometimes that causes hiccups and issues in my upper, dealing with my upper limit. And then with the relationships and friends and family and stuff that I do have, sometimes I have troubles even interacting with them in that sense, because I want them to be this all understanding or be able to give me the time and energy I need to, because I need to vent, or I need to do this, or I need to do that. And a lot of times I can't, it's like, when you come home and you walk in a house that's, nothing's really there, and you have nobody to say, okay, can I vent, or can I share this with you, or can I talk, or can I just sit here and crumble up and not be a part of the world for a little while and let you handle everything while I kind of decompress? Books like this help, but at the same point, it makes me, think of how can I apply this for myself and utilize this in my own life. And sometimes it's kind of hard to take all this and use it in a way that can help me get to my zone of genius. And so, and I love book, I'm loving this book, but at the same point, it's like, what do I do? So, in some cases.
I think we lost Karen. I think she must have dropped off. At least I don't see her up there anymore. Yeah, I agree with y'all. Like, relationships are messy. Humans are messy. I do love the fact that he reminds us that what we expect out of relationships and what we expect out of ourselves in relation to communication with each other and things is we probably have set our goals really high considering where we are in evolution. I mean, if you look, we've made a huge leap in, I mean, even though there's still wars going on in the world, as far as a lot of the world, there is civility, and people are learning how to be with each other, but it's challenging. And I think we beat ourselves up, or at least I do. I shouldn't say we. I beat myself up a lot about why can't I communicate with people better? What seems to be the barrier between me and these other beings that I know are part of me? Why is that so challenging? But like you said, Samantha, being in this group, reading all these books, this has helped me in huge ways. And I think, his 3 steps as far as taking time to yourself and speaking the truth and owning your emotions, those are great tips to move forward. Owning your emotions is huge, and telling the truth is huge. I mean, we all like to think that we tell the truth all the time, but in reality, we don't. Oftentimes it's through omission, or, by not telling our truth. It's not that we're actually lying, telling an untruth, but we're not telling our truth. And whether we do that because we feel like we're going to be judged for that, or my experience has been I have been judged for that. Even I don't have to go back to childhood. I mean, just I have real recent examples of when I speak my truth being judged. And so it takes courage to live in this world and to speak your truth. It takes a lot of courage, actually, to be who you are in this world, not who the world tries to tell you to be or who you think the world is trying to tell you to be. I think that's often the case. We have these, especially those of us that grew up in my generation. I mean, the television shows that we had back then compared to now is completely, totally opposite. Back in my day, I call it the Beaver Cleaver days, and all relationships were perfect. Nobody argued. I mean, there was this very unrealistic expectation that we saw relationships in. Of course, now we have reality TV, and I'm hoping that the children growing up now aren't looking at that and thinking that that is reality, because it's not. It's just drama to make money. Excuse me. But knowing the effect, looking back on my childhood and knowing the effect that the shows that I watched still have on me to this day in some regards, it makes me very glad that both of my children limit what their children get to see these days, because some of it you just wouldn't want them to. But I think, he gives great tips, and this emotion thing, I just have to add this in because I've been in attending conference all week about it. And if you haven't, okay, guys, it looks completely ridiculous, and you're going to feel ridiculous if you ever try it. But if you will just Google emotional freedom technique, a lot of people refer to it as tapping. It's a process where you tap acupressure points on your body in a certain sequence, and you say the truth to yourself instead of trying to hide from your emotions and stuff them down where they're going to make you sick, because they will eventually. I know this all too well. You're actually, Dan, you said you don't have anybody to speak to about these things. You don't have anybody you can unload to. You can do tapping, and you can be truthful with yourself about what is going on and what you're feeling. And even though it may seem very odd and strange, and you'll only do it in a closed room, eventually you'll see that you can get such relief from doing it that you're just going to be doing it anywhere, and you don't care if people call you crazy, because it can totally take you from one horrendous place of despair to hope again. It can, and it's been tested and scientifically proven through clinical trials that it can take your central nervous system from a sympathetic state to a parasympathetic state, a more relaxed state, so that you're not pumping out all these imaginary hormones that this lion is chasing you through the forest, and those hormones are doing damage to your body.
I just posted in the chat, but I do actually have a couple friends I do share.
So check out EFT or tactically embarrassed. Go ahead and do it.
I'm sorry, Catherine. I thought you were finished. I apologize on that. But to finish with, I do have a couple of close friends I do share things with, but like I said in the chat, I don't share to the depth of, say, like Samantha does with Chris, or somebody that's got a husband, wife, spouse, significant other, whatever, so even then I'm not fully letting things out in some cases. So yeah, that's why there are times where I do. Now the other night I was really feeling kind of in my emotions and feeling, and I looked over and I saw one of the other books we had done a while ago, and I looked at it and it reminded me of okay, I am self-love, God loves me, I am and in that moment, just even thinking that thought and saying that little bit over and over for a minute, so kind of brought me out of what I was feeling at that moment, and kind of reminded me that God, for me it's God, but the universe, that and myself, I love myself in that, And in that moment, that was all I needed, and it did help. So, I mean, there's some things I'm getting out of a lot of these books where when I take the time to actively think and work, I guess, towards that zone of genius, where I take that time to not look at what's exactly right there in front of me, but to, take that moment, step outside and do like what I did the other night, where I said, okay, I can get past some of it, but sometimes it's just still not the same as having somebody to really actively sit down, share it with, and sometimes, hate to say it, scream and yell, because, that's part of it sometimes. But knowing that they're not taking it personally, if I tell them I just need to, if owning my feelings and owning my thoughts, but also, I've learned that if I get things out of me too, if I say I'm going to get them out of me, that helps a lot too, because then I'm putting it out and not keeping it in too.
Let's talk about a little bit about these micro truths, because I feel like a lot of times we don't even know what those micro truths might be, or when we're failing to communicate them. And so I wanted to kind of bring that up a little bit, because from my experience, when I'm not sharing the micro truth, what I'm actually being or feeling or acting or doing is accusatory, judgmental, or being disappointed. And sharing those things instead, and getting to the bottom of what those things are is kind of the clue in to finding our micro truth in this situation. And so, for example, I see this a lot with younger couples, because they have kids, and maybe one person spends more time taking care of the kids and the other person spends more time working or whatever. And this happened when I was younger too. When I was working a full-time job, and the majority of the kids' responsibilities all fell on me. And then Chris would go and he worked his full-time job, and he would come home and he would just be laying around, and that I would always at that time would be very accusatory towards him, and I would be angry with him and judgmental and all of those things. And so the conversation would start with, why aren't you helping me? Or why aren't you this? Or why are you just laying there? Or you're just being lazy, or whatever. And so that's like accusatory phrases, rather than saying, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I had such a hard day today. I'm really struggling with the kids because they're running around like crazies, and I need your assistance. Can you please help me? And that is a more clear communication of what our micro truth is, versus being accusatory or judgmental. And whenever we feel like we are being, and this can be hard to even recognize in ourselves sometimes, is whenever we're feeling or we find ourselves saying accusatory, judgmental statements, is to think to ourselves, okay, what is it I really need in this situation from the other person? And digging down into that, and why do I need it? Because if we can say, why do I, what is it that I need and why do I need it? Then that gets into our internal workings of, what is it I'm really experiencing here that I can communicate to my partner, that they will respond to in a positive way. Because if I just say, why are you doing this? And you're not helping me, they're just going to be, well, I had a hard day at work, or whatever. I do plenty around here, or I bring in the bacon, or whatever, So there's that aspect of it. And so it'd be great if we could have a number of people come on here and say, what are the things you're struggling with in your relationship right now that start arguments? And let's dig into each one of these things and find the micro truth in it, because that would be helpful for anyone, I imagine. But maybe if you're watching this out there and you're on YouTube and you're struggling with something, you can post a comment under the video and say, this is what I'm struggling with. And maybe we can help you find your micro truth in that, to be able to communicate better with your partner. I mean, I'd love to help people with that. So I don't know. That's a thing. or if you just want to join into this conversation, obviously you can jump on with us. So we'd love to have you. Go to SaturdayMorningMastermind.com. That's where the instructions are. Any final thoughts for today before we wrap up, guys?
Well, I'm going to throw in on that third part about when emotions are in the air, as they often will be in close relationships. Don't try to talk yourself or your partner out of them. And I've done it to good close friends, or brother, sister, mom sometimes, in a very different way with my mom, but but where and I'm sure every woman has heard this from a boyfriend or her husband. Please don't start crying, or please don't cry. When the women are in the moment of it and they start crying, that just makes it worse and doesn't help, because I think in that case, it makes you guys feel like you're trying to be controlled, and that your crying is not important, or that it's not that big of a deal. Or I like this one. I've used it, lots of times. There's nothing to be angry about. From my point of view, what are you angry about? There's nothing to be angry about. But yet, for not taking into context the other person of how whatever was done, said, happened, might have affected them. And so I think that's the other part is, to allow ourselves and allow the other person to really be in their emotions, so that way they can feel comfortable and be more willing to speak their truth of how they're feeling. Like, oh, I'm so overwhelmed. I'm just, I can't handle this. Today I'm frazzled to my wit's end, and the kids are, just jumping on every nerve. I need help, that type of thing.
I think being frazzled at your wit's end and all that kind of blocks the whole idea of getting in touch with your micro truth. I know I have trouble with that, and I can cry when I'm happy, when I'm sad, whenever, and don't tell me not to cry, because I'll cry more. Y'all have a good week.
Lost
Thanks,
you there
Lori.
for a second, Dan. We just all of a sudden couldn't hear you, and then you fell off, and then now you're back.
I'd like to hop out and just say what I keep seeing out or in recognizing in this and in my own personal development is this awareness of how two people in the same conversation can be coming from it from two different areas. And it concerns me in that that not enough communication or energy is sometimes seems to be put into the act of opening those channels of communication. It's almost like I wonder and hope that I can get better at opening up that channel with any person that I'm in a relationship with, so that even the ability to communicate about things can be discussed. Because in this personal development place that we're all in, we're all in different levels of growth, and we look at things differently, and our needs are kind of differently, and so different. So that it helps, I think, to know what needs are important, what to be met, or what each person feels like those needs need to be met. For instance, when you're in it, someone you care about he comes to you, and they, in their relationship, they want to, constantly or consistently discuss the events of their day in a very dramatic way, and they tend to keep bringing that drama. And for them, it's helpful to them. They feel it's helpful that they can vent on you. But if you're in a place where you're trying to not focus on the negative, not that you're trying to disregard it, but that you're trying to focus, that you're kind of accepting the negative and focusing on the positive things that you do want, rather than harping on the things that you don't want. It's important to, if you're on the opposite end of that drama, it's important to be able to get what you need in regards to the positivity of it. And I think that well, it helps to know where you are in your growth, because and then be able to communicate what your needs are. Because if you're that person that someone depends on to be able to vent their drama to, but you don't want the drama, you're not a dramatic person, and you want to, you're very, like for me, I really appreciate just the sometimes just the small talk and focusing on the positive stuff, and I won't drama in my life, I don't tell people about. I don't, why put that on other people? Why bring that up into my frame of mind and into my energy while I'm trying to have a nice relationship with someone? To me, venting my frustrations and my drama or my anger about other things in the world to someone who I want to have a nice, positive, energetic relationship with doesn't make sense to me, to constantly at least be doing that, and at least wrap it up with a positive framing. I mean, even when I do end up like venting to someone, if it's say like if it was my mom or someone like that, where they could be a deeper discussion, I'm conscious enough to not walk away from that conversation, not in that conversation, with the negative energy that would make her worry, or to make that person walk away with a feeling of being drained and like they were just being used as a punching bag or whatever. It's I feel this need after discussing what's bothering me to be like, well, on the positive side, this, and this, and since I see this can be worked through, and now I'm, so I do feel better about it, and and kind of pull it all the way through and around to where some resolution is there, and that it actually, maybe the other person learns, but I'm learning and I'm getting to vent, but I'm not ending on a dramatic positive negative energy. But that's just me. And then I don't, I realize that other people aren't that way. And so a lot of times the conversations where they just vent and drop their drama, I end up walking away, coming out of the conversation all discombobulated and worried and with this negative energy. And then I have to figure out how to not allow that affect the rest of my day. So I say that's just something I seem to, the more I focus on trying to be positive and hold positive energies and do the work that's necessary to be in the right mindset, because it does take some work to focus, even, and to call it meditation or whatever, but it takes some work to have those change the momentum of negativity into positive, so that life starts to become easier. The perception of things starts to become more positive rather than always being a knee-jerk reaction to go to the negative. So that can take a lot of work. And if you're, I mean, I've had to distance myself from some friends that, because I can't explain to them that it's hard for me to explain to them that their drama is just too much. And it's not that I don't care. It's just that the way they're talking about it. I mean, I have a person who, I mean, been in conversations where a person wants to start the conversation positive, they're like, well, everything was going great until the shit hit the fan, right? It's like, okay, well, let me tell you about the good stuff first. So the problem with that is that while I'm trying to listen to all the good stuff, I'm thinking, oh, what's the shit gonna be? What's the shit gonna hit the fan gonna be? And it's kind of ruins the whole positive vibe of the first part of the conversation, because I know it's going to end with something really negative. This is just all things I notice and trying to work through with myself, and my trying to figure out how to manage in my relationships. So, but thanks for everybody's great points. These are the things you guys stir up in me and make me think about, and I really appreciate it, because it gives me the power to recognize it and then do something about it, and that's powerful. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I have to deal with something very similar with that with Chris, as he loves to look at all this political drama stuff. And I don't want to have any part of it. I purposely don't watch the news, because I purposely don't watch mumbo jumbo fake news on Facebook either, because I don't want to have any part of it. But Chris, he thrives on that shit. I don't know what it is, but he wants to watch it. He's all about that drama. And he'll come to me and he'll want to share this thing that happened, that so-and-so said, that blah, 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 blah. And when he goes into this, telling me of this thing that is, it just, it makes me angry that this is a possible thing that may or may not have happened out in the world. It brings up anger in me instantly. And I struggle with listening to him tell me some of this stuff, because I'm just like, the world is freaking insane and I can't deal with that drama. And so I have struggled with that a lot with Chris, but I have kind of come to the point where I'm like, okay, I recognize that you are into watching that stuff and you are wanting to vent to somebody about it, even though I know you're not going to do anything about it. You just want to complain about it. And I'm like, I can allow you to do that a little bit, but you've got to find somebody else to do it with, because I can't be the only person. I can take a little bit, but that's it. And I have to tell him regularly that it brings up feelings inside of me that I don't want to feel. I don't want to feel angry. I don't want to be mad about this. I don't even want to think about that. And part of that is stuff I probably need to work on within myself. But if I can just not have that, then I'll be perfectly happy. But anyway, so I mean, what it boils down to with me is expressing to him is that I appreciate that you want to vent about this, but we've got to limit it, because it just makes me angry. And then I want to go angry towards you because of the insanity that you're telling me. And so that helps at least a little bit, because then he can find somebody else to talk to and have a good old time talking. He's got his buddy Wiley, and they love talking about that stuff to each other, and they have a good time with it, and they don't come away angry at the world because of it. They just, it's their thing they talk about. And yet, I don't have to do it. I don't have to listen to that all the time, because I could tell him, look, I appreciate you, and I understand that that's something you want to talk about, but it's not with me. I'm not the right person to talk about with that. So you know, have your thing that you want to do and leave me out of it, you know, if you will, without just being rude, you know, because you can't just say, don't tell me because I don't want to hear it, you know, although I do say that sometimes, but he already knows the underlying micro truth of I can't do it. It just brings up too much negative energy that I don't want to feel. So anyway,
Yeah.
that helps.
Oh,
Go ahead, Dan.
I was just going to make a quick point to both of you because, and it was when you were talking, Jason, because I thought of in school when we learned about batteries and positive repelling positive and, you know, negative and positive attracting each other. I think that's part of what a lot of this is. You know, when you're positive and everything and somebody else is in the negative, they're needing to go to somebody else where they can, and I hate to say it this way, dump the negative to get back to a positive, but then that turns your positive a little bit into a negative. And so, like you said, it takes a little work to learn and understand. But I think Samantha makes a good point. If you can learn to understand that the other person is probably just dumping negativity in like that instance, like, you know, like you were saying, like with your husband with the political stuff, and learning the difference between, you know, somebody really having an issue and really needing to talk as opposed to somebody just in their head or, you know, having, you know, and they're needing to get rid of that. But it just was funny. I got a clear picture of two batteries, you know, the positives, you know, if you have two positives going at each other, they're going to, you know, bounce off. They're going to, you know, not want to, you know, attract because you're both on that same wavelength. And yes, even though we all want to be in the positive for some odd reason, the negative is what overrides and comes in and takes over. And it's like the person is wanting to get rid of that negative. Play, it could probably help us. Go ahead, Jason.
Oh, hey guys, I gotta jump off. I just realized it's 11:30. I gotta prep for this this interview I have coming at noon.
Okay. All right.
Well,
Sounds good.
Yeah, we'll have to
Best of luck
jump
with
off
it.
the live stream and then you guys can keep on talking if you want to, but I'm gonna have to.
Well, that's okay. It was just it was kind of more the same. Just, you know, like being aware, you know, maybe one side of the conversation doesn't want to take on that energy. My follow up was, you know, how do we communicate to the other person that, like, okay, I'm sensing that you're taking on all this energy and you want me to take on this energy. What are we supposed to do with this energy? Because I don't want to go through my day with all this. You seem to be fine with it, but I wonder if maybe if you didn't have this energy that you have now and wanting to speak and justify the way you feel about things, then if you didn't have that, would there be space for more happiness in your life? You know, I think that some of us are to that point where we want more happiness and less of that drama. And not that we want to be oblivious to what's going on in the world. Well, there's a choice to what you focus on. Thank you so much. Thank you, Samantha. Best of luck with everything today. Have a great weekend, guys, and a great week.
Awesome, guys. I'm sure I got to cut it short today. For those of you who are watching out there, I'm sure that you could be into having a much longer conversation about all these topics because anytime we get into conflict, we love to talk about it, right? So with that, guys, have a great, awesome, amazing week. And if you want to find us, go to mindsetmasterycollective.com. And that's our website. It'll give you links to our Facebook group and all of that kind of thing. And it'll show us all the previous, or a lot of the previous videos and whatnot. If you're on YouTube here and you've enjoyed this, please give us a like on this video. Share it with anybody you think that you'd be interested or that would be interested in it. And if you want to participate with us, go to SaturdayMorningMastermind.com. That will take you to a post in our Facebook group where you can find the instructions for getting on the Zoom meeting so that you can participate with us. So with that, have a great week. We'll see you next time on the Saturday Morning Mastermind. Bye for now.